Well, okay, we'll get started. We have just a few people live, but typically we have hundreds of people watching the recording, John. The advantage of being live is that people can ask questions. For those of you who are live, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A or the chat, and I will monitor those and make sure to ask them. So welcome everybody to the AI Tsunami webcast. This is the last webcast we are going to do. This is the 10th. We started this, David Beatty. David can't join us today, unfortunately. He's somewhere fancy with some fancy people. But we started this in January because we saw that Canada was falling behind in AI, and we wanted to share a perspective on why it was important to do that. And so we brought you 9 speakers, and hopefully you enjoyed that. I certainly did. I learned a lot, and I met some pretty extraordinary people. And as we publish this online, Quinn will put a list of all the others, and feel free to reach out to these people. I know we have Carol, for example, Pyovesan, who is a world-class, attorney on AI legal issues as well as governance issues. We had people in robotics. We had people in doing all sorts of things. So hopefully that was helpful to you. We were really proud of this series, but this is the last one, but arguably the most important one because we have somebody with us with John Stokes, who's got an extraordinary background. And I'll give you a quick introduction, and then we'll let John take it away, and then we'll ask some questions. But John, is originally from the UK, but has been in Montreal since 2007, and he's the co-founder and managing partner of one of the absolute best, VCs, not just in Canada but in all of the world, called Real Ventures. And so, deeply embedded into the startup ecosystem, has a really great understanding of, the different waves of technology and how they've impacted the world, society, and business. So he's going to share that with us. And in 2011, he launched Founder Fuel, which is Canada's top startup accelerator. He's been named one of Quebec's most influential people by the magazine L'Actualité, one of the 24 Quebecers we love by the Montreal Gazette. John is truly, an entrepreneur's best friend, and he has a really good grasp on what's happening in the startup ecosystem in Canada as well as in technology. So, and you didn't want me to tell this to you, but Real Ventures is starting a new AI fund. So if there's any of you who are LPs, give John a call because your money will be in great hands. So with that, John, please take it away. We're really thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. I'm a bit embarrassed to follow on that intro, but thank you. I am going to share my screen in a second. I would just say if anyone has any expectations of what you might hear from a venture capitalist, those expectations are unlikely to be met today. While Nick does say that we're very much involved in the startup ecosystem, very involved in obviously investing. We have hundreds of investments that we've been investing in. We've been investing in AI since 2016. What I'm going to share today is perhaps something a little more meta, and it's to give you a sense of the type of thinking that we believe needs to be done as we look 10, 15, 20 years into the future, which is really what venture capital is all about. So with that, I will share my screen, and I'll start talking you through. Hopefully everyone can see the screen there. So this session obviously is titled AI Tsunami, and David normally does his introduction where he says that his intuition tells him that the arrival of artificial intelligence might very well trigger an organizational extinction event on an unprecedented scale, especially for ones that don't prepare and act right away. The typical questions, if you've dialed into some of the amazing prior podcasts, have been things like, how can AI help us leapfrog the competition? How can AI keep the competition at bay? What are the legal frameworks we must consider? On and on and on, these types of questions. Everyone who hasn't seen the rest of these podcasts needs to dial in. But as I looked at them, and given this is the last one, I realized that so much has been said that I might have said. What else might I be able to say that hasn't been said? And so one of the questions that I sort of think is foundational to what I'm going to talk about is, do you believe in the inherent goodness of humanity? That may seem a strange question for a VC to start with this, but hopefully it becomes a little bit more apparent as we go through. So, and the reason I ask that is because while AI is making the seemingly impossible possible, which is really what venture capitalists have to believe in, making the seemingly impossible possible, There's also many, many questions about how it might also have the potential to make the seemingly unimaginable. How could that be, actually making that real? So the question that we are always asking ourselves is, does technology shape society, or does society shape technology? And if we look back over the past 100+ years, perhaps more, I'd suggest that tech has really shaped society more than the in. But one thing that has become clearer and clearer to us is that most tech that is being introduced to fix problems that prior forms of tech created. The most simple version of that is cybersecurity only exists because of the creation of the internet. And so many of the investment opportunities that we see are really investment opportunities that are dealing with problems that were created through the prior investment opportunities we saw. And so one of the questions we've been asking is that the way that it has to be, or is it possible that actual innovation and investment can be in service to something that doesn't just perpetuate a new form of problem? And one thing that has pushed us to think about this even more and more, the 2024 World Happiness Report, which just came out about 6 weeks ago, one of the things, if you get to read that report, is that it shows an increasing youth dissatisfaction. The youth has never been more dissatisfied, and in fact, it is the generation that is now the most dissatisfied in North America and Western Europe. That has never happened before. And this is primarily being brought about by tech, and is taking the forms of mental, societal, and planetary wellness, and the attacking of all of those forms. And we do believe that it's likely that generational pushback on tech is going to cause a rapid change in tech's look and feel as we go to the future, and also how it is deployed. Much of the innovation and the innovators right now are still building tech and thinking about tech for prior generations. But this incoming generation is telling us that something different needs to be done, something different needs to be deployed.
Hey, John, this is such an important point, and I know you've got a teenage daughter, and so do I. For those of you who have children as well, like the book The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is an absolute must read on this topic. It's really an amazing book, and it may even change how you raise your teenage children, especially daughters.
Thank you. Thanks for raising that, Nick. 100% double down on what you said there. Amazing book. Going back about 7 or 8 years, Tristan Harris, who became famous because of the movie The Social Dilemma, in it, he was positing that before artificial intelligence overpowers human strength, it'll overpower human weakness. And so one of the questions that we've been pondering over the last 5 or 6 years is that question of whether AI is being used to collaborate with humans or manipulate with humans. And as an example, to sort of test that, before I came on the show, I with the benefit of ChatGPT, I put in the prompt, how might I best be able to connect with David Beatty to increase the chances of him listening to me? ChatGPT had a longer response. This is one paragraph of it. It said that I suggest you make a personal connection through curiosity. Something like, I also read about your fascinating experiences in Papua New Guinea during its transition to independence. It must have been an extraordinary time. What inspired you to take on such a unique role? The question I would ask of everyone is me asking ChatGPT to assist me with that, is that in service to trying to build a deeper connection with David in order to benefit our mutual growth? Or is it to try and tee him up for something manipulative that I wanted to get out of him? This where it comes back to the question that I asked at the very beginning is, do you believe in the inherent goodness of humanity or not? So the way that we see it is that technology is an evolutionary accelerant that has actually outpassed the adaptive and regenerative capacities of thousands of species of fauna and fauna. Our technologies have been killing off hundreds of thousands of different species of fauna and fauna. And in the next 50 years, there is suggestions that perhaps another 1 million species will be lost, primarily as a result of the technologies that humanity has been deploying. I think that the existential risk that is now being presented, even more perhaps existential than in some ways than nuclear, is that AI is the first evolutionary accelerant that actually has the ability to outpace our own adaptive capacity. The AI-powered social networks and the damage that they are doing to the human nervous system are actually the canary in the coal mine, and that's why I really do appreciate the book that you raised there, Nick. So David implored in his opening quote that if we don't prepare and act right away, we may suffer from an extinction event. Well, I would propose that perhaps it's too late to prepare for AI. Acting should have started years ago. And I wanted to sort of just give a little bit of a glimpse into how Real Ventures, which, as Nick said, was sort of the first investment firm with an AI focus, saw things playing out in 2017. I'm going to take 3 slides from the 2017 pitch deck when we were raising our fund, the AI fund at the time, and show you how we were thinking, and knowing that there were places in the world that were well ahead of our thinking. So sort of 7, almost 8 years ago, this is how we were thinking, that startups were being built on the top of an evolving tech stack. Our 2008 fund, MSU08, then the 2011, 2014, and 2017 RV funds. Seeing how that in 2017, we saw that software underpinning deep interconnectivity, now being powered by AI, which was more than just data and UI, was really going to have profound impacts. We highlighted in that deck, if you look at the top paragraph, that every successful company will require applied AI research to win, and that market leaders are showing the way. Even back then, we were highlighting that there were 140 AI companies that were acquired since 2011. So we're now talking 13, 14, 15 years ago. In 2016 alone, there were 40 AI research-based companies that were being acquired by the likes of Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and many, many others. This has been happening for many, many years. It is too late to try and prepare. AI, at the point we were saying, AI is the next platform to enable massive productivity improvements and enable new experiences. And at that time, we saw that there were 3 major investment opportunities that were presented by AI. We call them applied AI, which is primarily the type of AI that most companies that are not deeply embedded in AI are now looking to try and use to catch up and to catch up with other companies that are using an AI first approach, which is where they really had no legacy and were able to embed AI from the very, very beginning. These companies are what I would regard as the sticks that are really pounding on existing companies to move faster and faster. And the applied AI companies are the ones that are trying to, the carrots that are trying to address some of the issues that the AI first companies are bringing into people's awareness. And then finally, the machine. We obviously, with all of the major organizations, particularly if we look at OpenAI and Google around and Microsoft around the ChatGPT and the other GPTs, LLMs, that the machine is a place which has really taken off. We were talking about Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, all making massive bets. Obviously, it's now 8 years later, that's really coming to fruition. And our focus in terms of how we as an investor work around the machine, it's really looking at infrastructure. We've made many, many bets into things like AI chips, quantum, and these are the areas where we felt that we could both most participate in working with the machine, because obviously trying to compete at the types of things that they do was really, we've seen it as a fool's errand. So I share those to sort of suggest that the thinking about what is now what was observable has been done 10, 15 years ago. What the question is, what is it that you can do when you wake up every morning right now? If it's too late to prepare for the near future, what should we do? And my recommendation to all directors, and it's what we're recommending to all of our founders, it's what we and our team at Real Ventures are doing every single day, is intensifying our ability to adapt. Adaptation is all we can do now. Adaptation starts with you as an individual, with me as an individual, And our individual response can then be scaled up by corporate response, but it all starts with individual responses. And for that, what that means is focusing on one's own inner development. One thing to highlight, for example, is the initiative called the Inner Development Goals, which really talks about 23 skills and qualities that humans, in this case directors, should hone in order to increase their capacity to adapt. This is an example of, or this is the 23 skills and qualities that is being suggested that humans, directors in particular, those of influence and impact, need to develop, broken into the areas of being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. All of these 23 skills and capacities are things that can be developed and that can be trained, can be worked on, invested time in, and will all increase individuals' adaptive capacity, which will all then result in a company's adaptive capacity. On the left-hand side, we see being, and the third one down is referred to as openness and learning mindset. And I'd like to maybe just dive into a little bit why I think openness and learning mindset is key for directors that are moving in this, that are now having to make decisions in this AI-powered world. To give a sense of how of this catalyzing an openness and learning mindset, I'd like to draw us back to a book that was published by AJ Agrawal in 2018 called Prediction Machines. AJ Agrawal is a professor at University of Toronto, an economics professor, and he was talking about the simple economics of artificial intelligence. What really came to me back when I was reading that book in 2018 was that neuroscientists are trying to mathematically model the brain, i.e., that's where artificial neural networks came from, and that AI scientists as such need to turn all problems into prediction problems and use neural networks to solve them. If you'd like to understand more about that, I can still thoroughly recommend AJ's book in terms of understanding it. Solving them, however, really means becoming more accurate at predicting when we are willing to agree on the results, because all AI is a prediction, and it's a better and better prediction. And by better, what we mean is that we agree on the results of those predictions. And when we consider that all of this predictive capacity is modeled on the brain, it makes you realize that humans are ourselves prediction machines. The importance of realizing that we're prediction machines is that we form our realities, because our predictions are so accurate that we create something that we call reality. It isn't reality, it just feels like reality because of how unbelievably accurate human predictions have become. And when our predictions aren't met, a new reality is created. That new reality often comes with some real pressures and strains on the human psyche in order to work how to move through it. Again, when we talk about adaptive capacity, it means how do you shift when your predictions of the current reality are not met. And so a belief that a new reality can be created is the underlying basis of an openness and learning mindset. If you don't believe a new reality can be created, you will not be open and willing to learn, and you will therefore struggle to adapt at the rate and speed that we're being asked to do. I would suggest that the most transformative shift in director consciousness may come from embracing the idea that we truly know nothing, while still accepting the responsibility of trying to predict absolutely everything. When we think about the future, we like to use the 3-horizon model, and I'd just briefly like to introduce it. The 3-horizon thinking, which is something that Real Ventures is using when it thinks about all of its companies and when it actually thinks about its own strategies. I thoroughly recommend it for every director to dive in and understand 3-horizon thinking.
Hey,
Just
John,
brief.
we have a comment from Susan Bagg here.
Yeah.
She wants to ask about a previous slide. Go for it, Susan.
Okay, thank you, John. And quick question on AI. Like, as I evaluate AI startups today, and my view is rather limited than yours probably, and I see a whole lot of it is recreation of old problems with AI solution, right? So basically, they're just creating same things with AI as solution versus the old solution. So how much value do you think they can add to existing solutions with AI as new technology? And connecting it to your three horizons, I think most of them are H1s and very few H2s, and I have not seen H3s at all. So, help me see what you are seeing, because I'm an AI agnostic. I've used AI in the credit decisioning space probably 10, 15 years ago, but I've not seen that dramatic transformation yet. So help me understand how AI can change it.
Thank you so much for that question. I think, as I'll show on this slide and the next 2 or 3 slides, I don't believe that as yet people fully understand what viable future that they are aiming for. And as a result of not knowing what viable future they're aiming for, they are using AI to simply make what they're currently doing, which is exactly as you said, Horizon 1, and just repeating the same old patterns. And I think they're repeating the same old patterns because they haven't invested the time to understand what that viable future actually looks like. And I will dive in a little bit more to your question in a second, but maybe you clearly are familiar with three horizon thinking, which really excites me. I'm not sure that everyone else is, so if I might, I'll just briefly talk through what we're seeing on this slide.
Absolutely.
And then I'll carry on with your question, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So just for people that haven't looked at it, you can think of the pattern access as Horizon 1 being business as usual, Horizon 3 being what is seen as a viable future, and Horizon 2 being the innovation horizon, which helps us move from the current business as usual towards whatever the viable future you're thinking is. And the reason that right now Horizon 1 is higher on that axis is because Horizon 1 thinking, i.e. business as usual, is much more prevalent in society than Horizon 3 solutions. Horizon 3 thinking, which is the viable future. And Horizon 2 is slightly higher than Horizon 3, but a lot lower than Horizon 1, because at the beginning, i.e. now, we're testing out what type of innovation might be able to move us forward. So over time, what we're looking to do is try and move from an H1 to an H3. Now, how do we do that? And I think this very much comes back to your question, is by innovating. But this is something which really is not understood, that when we think about innovation, we rarely think of it in terms of H2 minus innovation and H2 plus innovation. And I want to give a couple of examples of, in fact, I will give one while we're looking at this slide. One of the biggest things we're talking about in society right now, obviously, is climate change. And climate change is really looking at carbon capture as the answer. Carbon capture is seen as something which is an amazing investment opportunity, something that we need to be doing. Everyone is raving about how amazing it is and how much money is being pumped into it. I recognize that climate change is such that we do need to find ways to reduce carbon in the atmosphere, but carbon capture in itself is actually holding us back to a business as usual type of thinking. The better we are at capturing carbon, the less likely we are to stop producing and throwing carbon into the atmosphere. And as such, although it may be relevant right now, it's an H2 minus technology, which holds us back in old ways of thinking. And what we need to do is see how can we move to an H2 plus type of technology, recognizing that sometimes H2 minus technologies may need to exist to deal with the terrible challenges we've created for ourselves. But at all stages, we have to understand H2 minus technology is a dangerous technology which holds us back in the past, and we must be using it for as limited with kid gloves and with real safety alongside it. So I'm going to continue to move through even things, for example, as ESG. ESG is really deeply flawed in terms of its intent. ESG is really designed to limit harm, but its underlying assumption is that our attempt to implement ESG should not kill the company. In other words, the status quo, Horizon 1, is the priority. ESG is an H2 minus innovation to try and move us forward, but ultimately it will hold us back because it prioritizes not killing companies that are holding us back from a Horizon 3. Effectively, it says this company's existence is a priori. How can we limit its harm? And many of us, me included, are on boards. We sit on boards of directors that actually, at the end of the day, this is what the company that we're on the board of directors is doing. It is holding us back from H3. And so, as I said, despite its intentions, ESG is H2 minus. I've already talked about the carbon capture example.
Actually, John,
So,
because you didn't talk about the H2 plus response to global warming. So if H2 minus is carbon capture on your previous slide, what is an H2 plus and what is an H3 response to the carbon challenge?
Yeah, great question. So the H2 an H2 plus is one that moves us away from producing an amount of carbon that cannot stay within the planetary boundaries. In other words, releasing carbon into the atmosphere is something which is essential to be done in order to keep the planetary's regenerative processes going. Trees use sunlight and carbon dioxide as part of photosynthesis in order to release oxygen. So a release of CO2 into the atmosphere is actually part of a regenerative process. The issue right now is the amount that is being released. And so an H2 plus technology or an H2 plus innovation is one that is reducing the amount of carbon that is put into the atmosphere, bearing in mind that it is also part of a much larger system which is above and beyond carbon capture. So, for example, hydropower is certainly, and investing more and more in different forms of hydro is.
Everybody else lose John? Is it just me?
Yeah, we've lost him for a second there.
Yeah, hopefully he will come back. But I get the point. This is a really interesting point, right? H2 minus versus H2 plus. I think another H2 plus would be, if we can get really safe nuclear power and other things like that. But yeah, hopefully, John, this is really, really interesting. So hopefully he can come back. Let's give him a couple of minutes.
Are there any other perspectives here, Nick, that you come up with? I know that you have a very distinct perspective from the valley with what John has been presenting so far.
Yeah, and to go back to what Susan was saying as well, like a lot of what's happening is incremental, and I would, H1 plus, not even, here we go. Here's John.
Was there a question, or should I?
Yeah, love to keep going on the slide. I think your point on hydro or nuclear, I think was a really, really good point. If I understand correctly, the point is to actually trying to solve the problem with an H2 plus solution as opposed to just kind of short-term mitigation that's unsustainable with an H2 minus solution.
That's exactly right. But one thing I dropped off that I wanted to suggest is that when we start thinking in terms of H2 plus solutions, it's really important to understand that we are now moving into the field of systems thinking, not in the field of problem solution, because we have to recognize that even the introduction of hydro, normally done through dams, actually catalyzes other issues. And this is why, knowing that in the future, that we are constantly going to be impeding, and one thing will have a knock-on effect to the other. And it's the ability to adapt to what it is that the systems and the feedback are showing us is actually really, really key. I wanted to sort of shift back a little more to ensure that focus on the AI. And so one of the questions is what might be an H2 plus response to AI? And bearing in mind that I'm not building the companies, I'm simply talking to the entrepreneurs that are building the companies. The message that I'm sharing with them is things like, we need to be building products and services that are built on the belief of the inherent goodness of humanity, not an inherent right to win or dominate over other forms of nature. Now, that may seem extremely, extremely meta and high level. And obviously, there's lots of work that needs to be done to sort of say, well, how does that manifest within my actual business? But in terms of three horizon thinking, it's the understanding of what H3 is and where you're heading. And obviously, this is something I'd be willing to discuss and debate and learn and grow. But it's a question of knowing where you're heading, and that is what helps you decide whether your innovation is H2 minus or H2 plus. It has to start with a clear understanding of H3. And I think this is the issue that the previous questioner was saying. There doesn't seem to be a clear understanding of what H3P is, H3 plus is, sorry, Horizon 3 is for our society. So no wonder the responses are a mixed bag of H2 plus and H2 minus, and primarily H2 minus, because that's the most obvious thing to be done. And as I said, we need to build from a systems perspective, understanding the planetary ecosystem will always rebalance. And as I think we're starting to become more and more aware, that rebalancing will take place whatever the resulting impacts are on humans.
And John, is a great question from Margie. She's asking, like, so if H2 minus, going back to the CO2 issue, right? If H2 minus is carbon capture, would a good example of H2 plus be kind of changing the refining process so there's a lot less carbon to capture in the first place?
Yes, I would agree that is the case. Not spitting out as much carbon and finding a new way to do it is absolutely an H2 plus type of mindset. I would say that the complexity of things is such that you then need to look at what it is that you are doing in order to reduce the carbon output, and ensuring that also as you sort of go down and understand the other things that you need to do in order to reduce that in itself is not creating another issue which is worse than the thing you're trying to mitigate. But conceptually, yes, I think that's a good example. So I'm almost finished with my slides, and I guess I would say the key takeaways. Firstly, as directors, I would really, and this is what I and my team are spending all the time doing, developing our individual capacities to adapt, and let that serve both as a role model and a contribution towards an adaptive culture within your companies. Wherever possible, structure your internal and external relationships in a way that suggests that you believe in the inherent goodness of humans, not that you don't. Because if you are structuring things that says you don't believe in the inherent goodness of humans, that is what will manifest. Manifest and will continue in an H2 minus type of mindset. And AI will only be an existential risk if we as directors continue to think of the life of companies as being more important than all other forms of life. 1% of human data has been captured by AI systems. It's akin to thinking we know humans by visiting a nightclub. 99% of humanity's consciousness has never been captured. So while AI predicts better than humans, in reality, it still knows nothing about humanity. And I will stop my sharing there.
Matt, we know I need a stiff vodka after this. This is so profound and interesting. So kind of working, and please, if other people have questions, but my mind is spinning So I agree with everything you said, first of all. And second of all, in order to design the right solutions, whether it's societal solutions or corporate solutions, to your point, we need to think about H3. Not many people have thought about H3, at least when it comes to AI, more than you and your firm. While it's hard to predict, can you give us a glimpse of your thinking of where, we're going to be in this conversation, 10 years from now? What does the world look like? What are
Yeah.
the big things that have happened? Where are we as H3 in 10 years?
Yeah. That's a great question. I would say we're in the process of formulating where we think H3 would be. But I would say, firstly, the one thing that we know it isn't. I would say my firm's H3, and I would say the whole of the Canadian startup ecosystems, H3, for the last 15 years, as long as I've been involved in the startup ecosystem, H3 has been increase economic development at all costs, such that the economic benefits that flow through to our country will ensure that we can raise the tide and that rising tide will lift all boats. That, I think, has been the H3. What is increasingly clear is that not all boats are rising. The question is, therefore, do we need to do more economic development, i.e. double down, in order to lift more boats? My sense is that it's not nuanced enough. And I would also say the new generation that's coming through, when we talk about mental wellness, when we talk about societal, less societal cohesion, and when we look at the increasing strains of climate change on the planet, it suggests that actual more and more economic growth is not the answer. And so, should we say it needs to be more nuanced, should I say? And so an H3 of the future would be one in which there is a much deeper understanding of the interrelationship between everything, that it is not a fight of us against others and us against more. And I would say, from a Canadian context, I think what we would aspire is that anything that it looks like we are a world leader in, or could be in a world leader in, that we need to think about that from the point of view of how can the fact that we are able to be in a leadership position mean that we can use our leadership position to benefit others, not use our leadership position to simply benefit ourselves or to suppress others. And so this is sort of where I would see H3 is really about. You could say it's thinking in terms of operating in service to systemic balance and maintaining the right levels of regenerative capacity.
It's a great, really great definition. And it's, let me compare and contrast that to what you said about ESG, right? I mean, ESG aspires to kind of do that. Yet, when you talked about it, you found it lacking. So to get to the H3 you're describing, ESG is not the solution. How do we transform ESG as directors to get to this H3 world? So how do we transform ESG to get to this H3 world, and just the way you're describing it now? Because ESG is, to your point, not going to get us there.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say, for anyone that has shown a real commitment to ESG, is championing ESG. I do want to firstly say I recognize the inherent goodness in anyone that is trying to do that. I really do. I am simply saying that to increase the awareness of whether you are prioritizing the company over that ESG. And the more that you realize, I'm doing as much as I can, but not to a point of view where it actually impacts my returns, I would say that's just not enough. Real Ventures has stopped investing in new companies for the last 2 years, and our belief is that we wanted to sort of start from a fresh plate, because we don't want to bring any more companies into existence that aren't fundamentally built on this idea of understanding three horizon thinking. And therefore, if at the point of time when we're conceiving a new company, or I would say even as a director at a point in time when you're conceiving a new product within your company, start from the point of view of understanding that you're not addressing problems, you're looking at systems, and that what you're trying to do is shift a system. Make an effort to look at what is the best leverage point for us to intervene in a system, not what is the best product that we can put in place to maintain, to fix a problem. And I say that because one of the primary issues with that mindset is, if there is a big problem, a real issue, and you try and fix that problem, you've now set up an economic model that depends on that problem existing in perpetuity in order for you as a business to exist. That is a really, really tough thing to unwind. So therefore, as you're looking at launching something new, you need to not look at the problem, but look at what is the highest point that we, with our capabilities and insights, can intervene into the system in order to benefit all participants in the system. And I'd also stress that anyone who's looking at making those interventions from a launch or a creation of a new product, also understanding, what if this product was phenomenally successful? What might be the second or third order unintended consequences of amazing success? There's a gentleman called Daniel Schmachtenberger who refers to this as yellow teaming. And yellow teaming is really also an essential sense. So anyone that's looking at ESG, just understanding and becoming more aware of what it is, seeing of what it is that you are balancing, seeing if you can push that balance more and more and more in terms of not prioritizing the success of the company over the damage that's being created. And as you launch new products, consider what is the primary leverage point that you should enter into. There's a woman called Donella Meadows. I would recommend looking into any of the things that she's talked about. And then if it's about what might it look like if this was successful, too successful, a yellow teaming and Daniel Schmachtenberger.
Super interesting. There's two brilliant questions from Rob Shira here. The first one is like, okay, great, right? Going to systems thinking makes a lot of sense, but how do we incentivize companies and executives to do it? Because today, they are unlikely to. So that's one issue. The second point is, even if we do all this correctly and we do shift to a systems kind of thinking, isn't AI eventually going to develop its own set of priorities and values and ethics? And then all of the work that we're going to do as humans, even if we do all this work to, shift to systems thinking, will be for naught, because the AI will just do whatever it wants anyway. Are we totally screwed?
Well, so I would say, I mean, I love those questions, and I would just say, if you come back to the very first question that I asked, do we believe in the inherent goodness of humanity? If we do not believe in the inherent goodness of humanity, we are screwed. And AI is an inert technology that is filled with our consciousness. Right now, it's filled with 1% of our consciousness. As I said, it's a consciousness which is akin to the consciousness of humans in a nightclub. We are more than that. We are better than that. We just need to keep believing in it. And I am sure there isn't a single person on this call that doesn't believe in their own inherent goodness and in the goodness of their families. The problem is when they start thinking of others. It's always others. And so my perspective is, how can we make the best decisions possible, understanding the human condition that currently exists, but recognizing that we aspire for ourselves and for everyone else to move in that right direction. And if we can aspire to that, that is what AI will more and more and more be powered with. But this is a real dance. This is a real dance. And the outcome isn't certain, but I am very hopeful because of the amazing people, amazing entrepreneurs that I'm starting to see every single day that are investing in their own adaptive capacity, which is increasing their understanding of the inherent goodness of humanity. And they're starting to build teams and cultures and businesses based on that. And I come back to the fact that the new generation, the oncoming generation, Gen Zs, late millennials, are the most unhappy generation possible. It's because they don't see a future they like. But the founders that we're working with, the companies they're building, and the cultures what they're starting, they're building for that generation. And I really think that this new generation coming in, if we can help them not be absorbed within the current system, but actually provide a new system for us, I do really think that there is an opportunity to have a major shift in terms of how we work together. And I realize that what I'm saying sounds impossible, but that's what our business is about, making the impossible possible.
It's not just aspirational. I think it's necessary, but there's a number of really good questions about that shift. So let's assume that we agree that shift needs to happen, and we need to move to this kind of systems thinking, and kind of have kind of collective thinkers, right? I mean, Richard makes that's a really great way to put it. But there's a prisoner's dilemma, pretty obvious issue here, right? So how do we incentivize systems thinking at the company level, at the country level? And look, I'm Canadian, right? But I've been living in the US for the last 20 years, and Canada and the US have taken very different paths in terms of their governance in the last little while. And one could debate which one has been better, but one of the results has been Canada's GDP is now 77% out of the US, where it used to be 100%. And it's created, some misery along it, right? I mean, it's all relative, but so how do you do this in a way that doesn't hurt, the poorest people in your country, and you can still grow while, being a collective thinker?
Well, I think you could start off by recognizing that GDP is not a measure of societal wellness. And that is not a statement that is intended to cause a battle. It's a statement that is intended to cause more reflection on it. GDP is a measure which is always a relative measure, which means that a relative measure is something you can never win. But all discussions around GDP is a discussion about winning. And GDP is nearly always talked about in a per capita basis. And the challenge with the per capita basis is it doesn't reveal that, as you said, Nick, doesn't reveal the disparities that exist within the system. And so while GDP may have some merits, the reliance that it is used as a way to have a discussion and debate, it's an extreme over-reliance.
Yeah.
And so I think, I'm not sure that Bhutan's gross domestic happiness is exactly the way to go, but I think directionally we need to shift away from GDP thinking.
Yeah. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but there's a number of questions. I'm going to try to summarize the questions left into one question, which I think is a really important one. Let's say that, as a society, we agree with your point of view, and I personally do, right? That's just me. And let's say that, Canadians want to shift to that mindset, even more than they already have, which Canada has shifted partly to that mindset. But also we have to recognize that many companies are still at, age one. And Canada's fallen behind, arguably, moving from H1 to just H2 minus, right? I mean, there's just, basic call, and one of the points is like, even basic call center technology is not implemented in some companies in Canada. So if you're on the board of a company in Canada, you agree with what you're saying, and you want to enact change in that company, moving from H1 to H3, and swiftly as possible, but also responsibly, how would you approach that?
I think the first thing I would say is there is many about H1 that is good. There is much about H1 is good. As a director, I would not want anyone to come off this call thinking that I'm suggesting that all businesses in H1 are not conducive to being aligned with a regenerative planet and ecosystem. I'm simply saying, take a look at your current H1 and see what are the unintended consequences of the goodness through which that company was created. What are the unintended consequences that exist? And address and think about those unintended consequences, but not be thinking that all H1 is bad. I would also say, when it comes to Canada, the simplest way to say it is the Canadian H3 is clearly, from the system that exists, different from the US H3. And right now, I think there is a pointing to the problem, for example, of GDP growth relative, for example, to the US, and not recognizing that perhaps that is not a problem, but it is more a feature or a characteristic of an underlying Canadian consciousness, that we're moving to a different H3. And I think it's about that. It's about actually believing that Canada sees the world a little bit differently than perhaps our neighbors. It seems it much more aligned perhaps with the Nordic countries, and really appreciating and embracing our vision of H3, and looking at how can we systemically do things to move there, not just looking at the current predictors of what H1 is. So I know that I'm not sure if that's a helpful answer.
A lot of, this is, well, first of all, thank you. This has made me think so much. I'm going to be thinking about this all day, honestly, because there's so much to unpack. But it all goes back to, what are we trying to achieve, going back to your Bhutan versus, maybe US comparison, right? That is just really, and it's hard. Like, it's very tough to pick the right KPI for a country. And there's lots of trade-offs, but I love this kind of thinking. I can't thank you enough for, really enlightening us, frankly. And it's, to your point, it was really unexpected from a venture capitalist to discuss these things. And frankly, the companies who are going to be lucky enough to be funded by you with this kind of thinking will have a lot of impact in this world. So
thank you, Nick.
how can I get involved? How can I get involved with Real Ventures? This is amazing.
I'll be calling you up. Don't you worry. I mean, your impact for Canada is growing and growing and growing, and I'd love to find ways to do more together.
Just thank you. This is a perfect ending to the series. Really, really thrilled. And then Quinn, please take us away. And then for everybody who's joined us throughout the year, thank you so much. David and I hope that was helpful to you, and we are humbled by the hundreds and hundreds of people who've been watching these recordings. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just echo what Nick's saying. Thank you very much on behalf of David Beatty and Nicholas Darvagano. David is in Vienna right now for the Peter Drucker Forum. He was the vice chair there for about a decade. So that was sort of a last minute thing. But thanks to everyone who's been coming out consistently. I see about 10 faces. There are 85 signups. And this was organized on behalf of Nicholas and David to really get directors and other executive leaders who run institutions, who run and can make an impact on all of the things that John is talking about, whether it's H1, H2, H3 horizons, to get involved and to take this seriously, whether from an international lens or particularly a Canadian lens. So please take a look out for the session. You can review all of the old sessions from this year at aitsunami.co. And please send Nick, David, or myself any of your feedback on how the AI Tsunami has helped you. And if you have any ideas on next year too. Thanks so much. And yeah, please follow John. Thanks so much, John. It's been great to getting to know you.
Thank you, Quinn.
Speak with you all soon. Bye.